Welcome in to another edition of the Old North State Sports Show, folks. Hope you guys are doing well. Sunday evening for me, busy weekend. Had a shrimp, fish, whatever boil, not fish, but a shrimp boil this weekend with my wife, one of her friends. They came over, it was really good, man. I don't know if you guys have had that. It's fantastic. Potatoes, corn, sausage, shrimp. We had some other stuff in there. Crab legs. My gosh, tons of crab legs. It was a feast. That's one of those things that you can't really have leftovers because who wants to reheat that stuff up the following day? Like, let's be real. Anyways, good weekend. Pearson had soccer as well. But anyways, you're here. You're here to learn about football. Maybe not learn about it. Hear me talk about it. So welcome in again, folks. It's a pretty light week when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, and that's part of the reason why don't have any fancy graphics. If you guys are watching on Spotify or YouTube, again, appreciate you guys as we continue to grow. Speaking of growing, this week, finally planning to upgrade the microphone. I've been looking at the Shure mic, quite a few. Just have to figure out like what's the best one for me. So for those that have been with the show, as long as you have, I've had a microphone. I use the Yeti mic thanks to my father-in-law. We're going to be upgrading. All thanks to you guys for tuning into the show and not having to contribute a dime just based off of YouTube viewership. So it is very much appreciated. So I guess we can start with the little news that we've had thus far, which is the Carolina Panthers have still not picked up an additional safety. They brought in two earlier in the week. At least to this point, as I record this, like no news has happened. They left the building. Some folks are upset, continue to be upset. That's just the nature of this franchise, man. People are upset. They think that we're a pawn, which is partially true, that we're just used to get better compensation, better deals for these players. So they come to the Carolina. They're like, hey, what's the price you're going to pay me? Cool. Let me write that down. Let me head over here and get paid a lot more money. But safety continues to be a position of need. I've talked about it. Dan Morgan's talked about it. This is going to be something the Panthers have to address. Ideally before the draft, just to put yourself in a better situation. But I don't think that means that they're done, as Dan Morgan has said. So we'll continue to monitor what the Panthers decide to do. We're going to get into, I'm not going to say a mini mock draft. We'll look at a mock draft that was put on, I believe, by ESPN. If you're wondering, maybe you are wondering why I have not gotten into a lot of mock drafts this year. Just a personal opinion. So when I look at the content that I create for you guys, I've kind of floated around, and I need to put these on paper. But I look at a few morals, a few guiding points of who I am as a person, as a content creator: honesty, integrity, the truth. Like those three things are the focal point of what I do, which is why I don't bite into rumors, why I don't really talk about personal issues or things like that. We stick to football. I personally don't like to go into the land of whatever it is. But anyways, that has nothing to do with the draft because the draft is the draft. But from my perspective, if you are honestly going to evaluate these guys and put your, I guess, name on the line for how you feel about these guys, I think there is a level of effort that I hold myself accountable to that I I'm not able to do it, to say the least. So thinking about, yes, I could sit here and I can do a 5,000 mock drafts. I can do as many as I want. And I can look at PFF, I can look at Pro Football Network, or whoever else is doing a mock draft. And I can say, yep, this guy is good because of X. I kind of did that last year. And I think the year before, the last 2 years, it all blends together. The 2 years that I've done this, we looked at the mock drafts. We did quite a few, only like 7 or 8 last year. But I just can't be one of those people that isn't spending time looking at all 22, because what people do, and this is not everyone, but what people like to do, and fans, is they look at the all 22 film, not all 22, they look at the highlights, not the all 22. And they make an assumption about this player and this player. And that's great. I mean, highlights are good, but it's not film and it's not the level that we need. And I'm just like, why are we playing this game? That's my personal, like, why am I playing a game? And then in months from now, when we go back and look at all this stuff, sure, I guess it's fun in the moment, but we forget about it. Our picks are wrong, our takes are wrong, everything we said is wrong. Look, if we were, and the folks that you follow were evaluators of that level, they would be hired by an NFL team. Hands down. It's the honest truth. So, as someone who sits where I am, I will likely do another mock draft or two, but I like to be transparent. And I think you guys should take it kind of with a grain of salt with what you hear out there. Not even just that, what you're hearing, even from these national mock drafts, kind of the same thing. I will say they do have an edge or a leg up, primarily because these guys work with it, folks. Like, we know these guys get into it. They have sources. They're hearing what they hear from scouts and people around the league. At least that's how they portray it. So, anyways, I don't know where I was going with that. That was not really the plan for me to divert. But I say all that. We are going to take a look here in just a second at an ESPN mock draft. So, anyways, news about safety. Safety's got to be addressed. Hands down, going to happen for the Carolina Panthers. Continue discussion about linebacker, edge, and wide receiver. Like, those are the continued hot topics for this team. One thing that's buried away as we start to see these top 30 visits, that's another thing that is valid. I highly recommend staying in tune, and I will pull this in for you guys as we get into it. Top 30 visits bear a lot of meaning, folks, because they will tell you who the Panthers are meeting with, and there's a good chance the players that they meet with are the players that they're looking to draft. That's just how these things work. You get to know the guys a little bit better. You get to bring them in, and that's how it usually plays out. Like, a good portion of the guys that are coming in for top 30s, as long as they're on the board, there's a good chance the Panthers are going to be looking at these guys. So if you are someone who's at home sitting and tracking, it'll either tell you player type and or position of need, because we have had some offensive linemen that have been floated around, and that's something to think about. I don't know how many people would have pictured offensive line is a need out of the gate for the Carolina Panthers, at least not in the current state that they are. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But as we continue down the path of Panthers news today, or at least this past week, we'll take a look at some news centered around Raheem Blackshear. And it's been reported by Joe Person of The Athletic that there is mutual interest between Blackshear and the Panthers for Blackshear to make a return. It's great. We're in the land of special teams play right now. We don't really have a kick returner. You could throw Xavier Legette back there, sure. But given his health and status, I don't know I don't know how often we're going to see him back there this coming up season. So I like it. It makes sense. He's a third string running back. If you can get that out of a third stringer, so be it. And maybe he's here for a year or 2 years. You got security back there. Other news is we did talk about wide receiver. Although the Panthers aren't necessarily making a splash at the moment when it comes to wide receiver, as the free agent market is pretty much dried up and there's not many available players out there on the market. We did have a report last week that the Carolina Panthers are bringing in Hunter Renfrow, Clemson football alum, taking a visit. Of course, spent some time with the Las Vegas Raiders. He spent last season off, did not play in the NFL, and he's looking to make a comeback. And he is more of a slot receiver. And I know there's some people that's like, okay, so what are we going to do? Just stack a bunch of slots? Jalen Coker plays the slot. I don't know. I'm a fan of it. I am. I mean, I know you have David Moore as well, and then maybe these guys aren't like your top home run hitters. I was going through tonight, just taking a look at like where the Carolina Panthers are and how was their offense? Because There's not a lot of movement happening on the offensive side of the ball, at least not right now. Doesn't mean it's going to not happen in the draft with maybe the second round with a wide receiver. We will see. Depends on how this thing plays out. But the Panthers were 12th in the NFL this past season in offensive touchdowns. 40 offensive touchdowns. 12th. That is not a bad offense, folks. It really isn't. So for the front office to look at what they have and run it back and add in a Rico Dowdle, maybe add in another wide receiver, I'm a fan of it. Offense was not as bad as we think it is. Sure, the games at some points were lopsided, but a lot of that has to do with the defensive side of the ball, which is, again, why the Panthers continue to emphasize defensive players. So I'm here for it. Again, maybe not the biggest flash you wanted. And to be honest, when you look at the Stephon Diggs contract, and I saw it come through tonight, it was a pretty good contract. It was one that the Carolina Panthers absolutely could have constructed a lot of incentives built into it. Low number this year. Next year, that number goes up as far as like the base salary cap hit. But it's a reasonable contract. And so I get maybe the concerns over the ACL, and it did look like a lot of money initially, but something worth exploring. Although I will tell you all this to say, I don't know how many people saw the live stream on Fridays. I was at work, not actually working. I went on a break and was walking, and we were live streaming about wide receivers and the frustration. And I was just talking through like the state of the Panthers, and maybe, just maybe, the Panthers feel good about what they have. But I will tell you, there should be a little bit of concern at the wide receiver position when it comes to Yak, as Bryce Young has not had any Yak producing wide receivers his first 2 years in the NFL. And the Panthers were last this past season at 1,500 yards. That was one of the big differences between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young in year one for both players, was almost 1,000 more yards in Yak for CJ Stroud and his receiving core than what Bryce Young had here. Another year, Panthers last in the NFL. Again, maybe there's hope and belief that it's on the roster and it'll work itself out. But you got to have guys that can get the ball in their hands and do something with it, whether it's a screen, whether it's catching a ball and making a nice run and gain, or going over the top, scoring touchdowns, like opening this thing up. So I'd continue to emphasize that. We will see what the Panthers decide to do. Speaking of what the Panthers may decide to do, it feels like as we, kind of get closer and closer and closer, that there's going to be a lot of talk about the Carolina Panthers pick at number 8. Should they stay there? Is it going to be Ted McMillan? Is it going to be Tyler Warren? Although he may be sliding down in some polls, is what I've seen. Is it going to be Jalon Walker, or is it going to be Michael Williams? I mean, those are or Malachi Starks. There are about 4 or 5 names up there. Sure, there's a few more we could put up in that conversation, but we'll take a look, or at least I will share ESPN's draft analyst Matt Miller's 7-round mock draft. So with the first pick, and this is varied between a lot of outlets now, he has the Carolina Panthers taking Jalon Walker. Walker is a dream fit in Carolina's scheme, as he'd be ideal as a stand-up, a 3-4 outside linebacker opposite of Clowney. The 243-pound Walker served as a hybrid linebacker and pass rusher at Georgia, showing high upside with 6.5 sacks, 10.5 tackles for loss, despite not rushing the quarterback full time. He has the first step quickness and hand power to consistently have double-digit sack seasons. That says quite a bit. And a lot of people shooing him into a Micah Parsons type. I don't know if I'm sold on that. Michael Parsons is a really good football player. While many see the 6'1 native translating well as an edge rusher, he also played a bit of off-ball linebacker during his career. Know him as a hybrid type. People want to continue to compare him to Frankie Louvu. Sure, I get it. Louvu had a heck of a season here. That's what catapulted him. I mean, 2 seasons, but catapulted him up to Washington to get his contract there. And living his best life. Moving on from that, he has the Panthers, and it doesn't look like there were any trades in this scenario, taking Ty Robinson, a defensive tackle out of Nebraska, with pick 57. So sticking along the defensive front. Again, not mad at that. Anything on the defensive line. Good. Isaiah Bond, wide receiver out of Texas at pick 74. RJ Mickens, safety out of Clemson. Finally a safety. Clemson player drafted is what I meant to say. Denzel Burke, cornerback out of Ohio State at pick 114. Jared Ivey, edge out of Ole Miss at pick 140. Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State at 146. Damian Martinez, running back. And again, Panthers may look for an additional big running back, pick 163, considering Dowdle may be here for only a year. And Brady Cook, quarterback out of Missouri, with pick number 230. If I'm the Panthers and we get into the 7th round, knowing if they still hold on to this pick, I'd be much more of a fan of them drafting a special teams player at that point, a kicker, if we're being honest. Quite a few kickers that are available in this draft. Anyways, folks, that's going to be a wrap for today's episode. We will be back with more content this week as we get you guys back up to speed, get myself back up to speed. As always, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.